Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have some games to discuss. First things first, for any of you that are looking for my breakdown of the Auburn game, I actually recorded that and put that out on the YouTube channel on Saturday evening, immediately following the Auburn game. Wanted to put out an immediate reaction. So that video I can link down in the description, but that video has already come out. It's not going to be discussed in this actual episode. This episode, we're going to do a little different. I'm going to talk about the Alabama baseball team because they've got out to an incredible start. Then we are going to talk about the SEC basketball tournament. I will be in Nashville this next week. Hopefully, I'll be able to catch a game or two. We will see how that turns out. But I'm going to talk about the about Alabama baseball. Then that SEC basketball tournament and what to expect in Nashville. I will give my prediction for the SEC champ and some teams to kind of watch out for that may be a little under the radar. Additionally, if you are, interested in the channel, please subscribe. I know a lot of the people that watch these videos, watch the podcast, are not subscribed to the channel, so I really would appreciate it. It does help me out. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, throw them down in the bottom. I do read them all as much as I absolutely can. Last thing, if you enjoy the podcast, please let me know how you like the quality. I've actually changed around the camera that I'm using for the podcast, so I am curious to see some kind of feedback on that. The Auburn video was also recorded with the same camera, but just was curious to see if y'all would just let me know how the overall quality of the camera and everything is. I really would appreciate it. But let's get right into the episode and the content. So first things first, I want to talk about the Alabama baseball team. I actually waited till Sunday afternoon to record this because I was waiting until the Alabama Presbyterian game ended. Unfortunately, it did not end in favor of the good guys. Alabama dropped its first loss of the season to Presbyterian. They had actually ruled Presbyterian in the two other games earlier this weekend on Friday and Saturday to get out to a 16-0 start, the best start Alabama baseball has ever had. Alabama has just been swinging the bats absolutely incredibly well and has won a lot of really big games. They were able to eke out some wins to start the season, and then when they were in their tournament in Jacksonville, they played three really good teams. Coastal Carolina, they win by a score of 9-2. They beat, at the time, number 15 NC State by 5-0, and then they beat, in what was an incredible comeback, a game that I actually was able to catch a good bit of, Ohio State by a score of 12-10. And this was a situation where that Ohio State game, Alabama was down 10-0, and Alabama, just kept, fighting back. And then Will Hodo hits a 3-run bomb to win the game in the ninth inning. Was just an absolutely incredible game, an absolutely incredible comeback to win that tournament there in Jacksonville. And, obviously it helps catapult them into the start in which Alabama's had to start this season. That's one of the best starts the best start Alabama baseball has ever had. They sweep North Dakota State last week. And then this week they actually also had another big win. And for those of you in the state of Alabama, you may not think this is as big a win as it is, especially if you don't follow college baseball, but Alabama beat Troy by a score of 3-1. And Troy is a top 20 team. This is a team that's going to compete to potentially host a regional this year. It's a team that you do not want to see as your number 2 in your regional if you're hosting yourselves. This is a really, really good baseball team, and Alabama is able to beat them by a score of 3-1, right? So, just really like what you're seeing out of the baseball team. When you talk about Alabama baseball, especially this year, there's nobody bigger and nobody better on campus, you can argue, than Justin LeBron. He currently leads the country in RBIs. As of this recording, he has 11 home runs. I'm not sure how the rest of the country shaped out. He was previously tied for first place in home runs. He had a couple this weekend, so I would expect him to be, near around the top of the country in home runs again still. But with 11 home runs, and as of this recording, he has 43 RBIs through just 17 games. So, just absolutely, as you say, seeing a beach ball in the batter's box, right? Every time, ball comes to him, he's just absolutely knocking the cover off of it, putting the ball in play. Teams are having to pitch around him whenever possible. A lot of intentional walks I'm sure are going to be coming his way throughout the season, especially against some of these weaker teams. When you get into SEC play, you're going to have some pitchers that are going to want to face him one-on-one, and we'll see how that ends up working out, right? But, LeBron's not the only guy that's been having success at the plate. You have three other guys. LeBron's actually hitting 394, but you have three other guys hitting over 400. Hodo, that we mentioned earlier, that hit the 3-run bomb to win that Ohio State game's hitting 417. A couple other guys, Richie Balamano Jr. is hitting 407, and Cade Snell hitting 403, right? So really just wanted to record this. I'm not, by any means considering this a full comprehensive Alabama baseball breakdown or preview. I would be interested. I may reach out to some people that I know are much bigger baseball fans and that know much more about the team than I do, just to get some of their recaps, kind of midway through the season after we've been able to have a few SEC conference series. That actually starts this next weekend in College Station. Alabama's going to go play Texas A&M, formerly the number one team in the country. They had an injury to their third baseman, preseason All-American. But, this is still a really good baseball team. There's a reason they were ranked number one in the country. Alabama goes to face them in College Station this next weekend, and I'm sure it will be an incredibly tough series. But Alabama is, gonna have to prove their best to be able to win in this conference, right? A couple of polls have Alabama ranked at 23. They're as high as 17th for the USA Today poll, but in the polls in which Alabama is ranked 23, they're 23rd in the country and 14th in the SEC. 12th in the SEC. That's just how good the SEC is in baseball. For those of you that, watch this channel, pay attention to SEC basketball. We've talked about how good the SEC is in basketball, and they absolutely are. They're an absolutely incredible basketball conference. They're even better in baseball, right? When you look at the baseball side of the house, Florida in some polls is ranked 7th in the country, and they're 5th in the SEC, right? 4 of the top 5 are all SEC teams. That's how good this conference is in baseball, and it's just on another level. So when you see Alabama getting off to this hot of a start, especially in non-conference play, that's really good to see. We will see how it continues rolling when you get into SEC conference play. I'm sure you're going to have some tougher series. You're going to have some series in which you're not going to be able to just outslug the opposing team. You're going to have actually have some situational baseball, some timely base hits, good eyes in the batter's box, etc., to be able to win some of these games. So I will be obviously keeping track of that. That is something that I want to cover. I know I cover a lot of Alabama football and basketball, for good reason, but I wanted to shout the guys out for an absolutely incredible start. Really, really good to see. And like I said, with LeBron just playing absolutely out of his mind, I thought that it really was worth shouting out and was something that needed to be discussed. So that's what I want to talk about on the baseball side of the house. Obviously, by no means was this a comprehensive thing of everything that Alabama baseball has going on. Like I said, I may talk to some people that I know that follow the team a little more closely than I do and see if I can get them on the pod. But, just wanted to talk about and give them the shout out that they deserve. So we're going to move over to the SEC basketball tournament, and then we'll get out of here. So the SEC basketball tournament, the field is set. Alabama, as we know, we talked about last week, Alabama secured the double bye with the loss that happened to Missouri. That secured Alabama into the double bye. Alabama's win over Auburn on Saturday actually secured us the 3 seed in this tournament. The thing with that 3 seed, what that does is that keeps us out of Auburn's side of the bracket. So if Alabama and Auburn are to rematch, it would be in the SEC championship game. I think that there is some positives to that. The other thing that I would say about that, and I think the slightly bigger thing to me, is it also keeps Texas A&M out of the team that you're going to play next. Because if all your top seeds win, it would be the 4 seed would be a Texas A&M Tennessee, and that would have been an Alabama Texas A&M. Obviously, I know Alabama did beat Texas A&M at another time during the season. But it's a situation where that Texas A&M team plays super physical. They're a really, really good rebounding team. They're a team that really can bully you on the boards. And, it's a team that if you're talking about a pseudo rest before the NCAA tournament and, a slightly less taxing game on your body, the A&M is absolutely not one of those, right? So that is something that I do appreciate, that not having to play Texas A&M on our side of the bracket until a potential championship game is something that I actually very like to see. If we're going to look at, Alabama's path, we'll kind of talk through all the different teams, what my predictions are if we look through each game, and then we'll kind of say what I think the Alabama's path is and who I think are some sleepers in this tournament. First things first, I think that Arkansas-South Carolina game, I think Arkansas is a team that is playing some of its best basketball right now. I think Arkansas definitely wins that game. I think Arkansas is a team that can definitely give Ole Miss a run for their money. I would honestly expect Arkansas to probably beat Ole Miss in that game. I think Arkansas, like I said, for whatever reason, I think Calipari has put it together and is a team that people are not going to want to face in the NCAA tournament. They've been able to put it together, even missing Boogie Flynn, even missing some of the guys they're missing. Adu Thiero's been missing for part of these wins, and they have done just a really, really good job. And Cal has got his guys playing some of the best basketball at this moment. So Arkansas is a team that I do think probably wins 2 games. I think Auburn probably does beat Arkansas, but I think that Arkansas probably advances all the way to that Auburn game. Then the Vanderbilt-Texas game, honestly, that one's kind of a pick-em to me. Vanderbilt, I think, is the better team, but Texas obviously has the freshmen that can absolutely play incredible basketball. I think that Texas, at times, if they get a hot shooting night, they can win the game. But I do think Vanderbilt's the better team. Nevertheless, whoever wins that game, I do think Texas A&M wins the next game, and I think Texas A&M Tennessee is the matchup you're going to see happening on Friday morning. Then you got LSU Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State has to win that game. I think Mississippi State is at a level where Mississippi State is reeling, and they have lost some games, and they're really looking to see, hey, we got to win some games and get ready for the NCAA tournament because they are going in the wrong direction. If I pull up State currently, here recently, they have lost 4 of their last 5, including with their only win actually being against LSU at home just over a week ago. So this would be a rematch of that game. Like I said, I do think Mississippi State wins that game. I think Mississippi State just is a better team than LSU. I think they're a more physical team. I think that you're looking at a guy like Cam Matthews, Josh Hubbard. I think that those guys are going to be too much for LSU. So, like I said, I would take Mississippi State in that game. And then Oklahoma, Georgia, right? Oklahoma, Georgia, honestly, is a game that I think could go either way. Oklahoma is not a team that I want to play because I think Jeremiah Fears is a great player. When you talk about March, you talk about guards win in March and elite players win in March. I think Oklahoma has that in Jeremiah Fears, somebody that just absolutely can catch lightning in a bottle, that is as good a player as anybody is in the country. Oklahoma is the team that if they can make March Madness, they're 6-12 on the season in the SEC, but they have some big wins over Arizona, over Louisville, over Michigan. So they have, some okay wins in the non-con, even though they have a fairly, weak total schedule, but they do have some big wins in the non-conference. If they can win this game against Georgia, I think they probably get themselves into the NCAA tournament. And again, if they win this game, I think that they can rely on Jeremiah Fears and rely on a guy that absolutely can get them, some wins, whether it be in this game or just in March in general. When you have an elite player that can go off and be as successful as he is, that's somebody that I really look at. Not to say Austin Newell is not a great player. He is. Austin's awesome for Georgia. But I do think that I'm going to go with the guard. So I probably would go Oklahoma in that game. Then if we're looking like Mississippi State, Missouri, I think Missouri probably wins the game. I think that could be a close game, especially if Mississippi State can put it together. Missouri is a team that, obviously when Alabama played them, they had a super hot shooting night, but they're a team that sometimes if they're not shooting well, their defense, their physicality is not always the best. Their defense is, sometimes hit or miss. So Missouri is one that I would expect that, they beat Mississippi State the one time they played this season by a score of 88-61. And that was actually on the road in Starkville. So this is a situation where I think Mississippi State obviously was embarrassed in that game. So I would expect State to try to play better. like I said, I think I would go with State, even though Missouri obviously had the bigger win earlier in the season. I think State just has a little more to play for. It would not shock me if that game went either way, though, right? As much as I think that Mississippi State, could win the game because I think they have some more to play for and to try to right the ship, similar to what we saw Alabama last season, try to right the ship. I do think Missouri is a team that obviously can beat Mississippi State. They've proven it on the floor, and they, at their best, they can play with anybody in the country. And then it would be Oklahoma-Kentucky. And Oklahoma-Kentucky is a game that I honestly do believe that that could go either way, right? Looking here, they played one time this season. It was on the road in Oklahoma, or for Kentucky. It was on the road in Oklahoma, and Kentucky pulls it out on the buzzer beater by a score of 83-82. I would probably say that it's Kentucky. For any of you that have never been to the games in Nashville, you know that Kentucky fans travel as well as anyone in the country. They turn Nashville into Kentucky South. They are a very, very, passionate fan base. They're a fan base that does a great job, traveling for their team. Do I think that Oklahoma could win the game? Sure. I think that Oklahoma has the players and the skill talent and the ability to win that game. If I have to predict, I probably would say Kentucky wins. I think that overall Mark Pope has done a really good job this season. I think that he would be able to figure out what caused them issues in that first game. I think that overall Kentucky has more shooters. I talked about Jeremiah Fears, and he's an elite player, and I think that he could have a lot of success. But I think that Kentucky overall has some shooters, and because of the injuries that they've had this season to Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler, some of their freshmen, whether it be Travis Perry, Colin Chandler, Trent Noah, they've all kind of grown up this season. And so at times you're getting some really good shots, some really good play out of those guys. So I do think that they could play pretty well. And I think Kentucky probably does win that game. Like I said, I think that the injuries that happened earlier in the season helped force those guys into the spotlight and be able to be more prepared, which would set up an Alabama-Kentucky game on Friday night in Nashville. I think that Alabama wins the game. Alabama's obviously beaten Kentucky twice this season, once in Rupp, once in Coleman. I think that the absence of Jackson Robinson is something that still concerns me. Obviously, they would have Lamont Butler back in this game, but for me, it's a situation where it's really tough for me to, not to say, and I just talked about how good the freshmen are for Kentucky, and I think that they are, but I think the concern that I have when you look at how Alabama and Kentucky match up is when you have Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler both on the floor, and Otega Owe at that point also on the floor, you have multiple guards that can defend Alabama's guards, right? Alabama goes pretty heavy on the guard lineups, especially against Kentucky. And when you have, guys like Colin Chandler or Travis Perry that are trying to guard Mark Sears and Aiden Holloway and LeBaron Philon, that typically just does not work out best. Those guards for Alabama can get downhill. They're shifty. They're quick with the ball. They're a situation where in most cases Alabama, especially in that game in Coleman when Butler and Robinson were both out, Alabama was able to have a lot of success in just getting by Perry, getting by Chandler. And so I would expect Alabama probably wins that game. I think that the guards are the difference in the game when you look at that. Obviously, it would be a little better for Kentucky because they would have Butler back. It would be a little more similar to what happened in Rupp Arena. But I do think that Alabama would be successful enough to win that game. I think that the team just has enough to prove. And so I would expect Alabama wins that one. So that would probably set up your then we would have potentially Mississippi State, Florida. I think Florida is just as hot as anyone in the country. I think Florida wins that game. We're looking at like an Ole Miss Auburn. I do think Auburn does win that game. And then Texas A&M, Tennessee, I actually would probably go with A&M, which would set up the two teams that Alabama and Auburn lost to last. Auburn versus A&M and Alabama versus Florida. I think Auburn, A&M, it would not surprise me if this led to another Iron Bowl of basketball SEC championship, because this is a situation where, again, both teams were kind of punished, right? A&M punished Auburn on its home floor, just out-physicaled them, really grabbed every offensive rebound and showed Auburn what Texas A&M brand of basketball is. They were really physical on the glass. They were really physical on the defense. And overall, A&M was just a really good team and caused Auburn a lot of trouble in College Station. I do think Auburn would learn from that mistake. Would it shock me if A&M was able to do the same thing to Auburn again? Actually, no. I think that Janai Broome potentially is dealing with a little bit of a leg injury. Obviously, we know that Denver Jones is still dealing with the injury. So if Auburn's not at 100% with how physical A&M plays, how bad that they can bully you on the glass, I would think that Texas A&M potentially could do it to Auburn again. It's not something that I would fully bet on, but it's definitely not something that would be completely outside of the realm of possibility. And then the Alabama-Florida game. Honestly, even though Florida just was able to have a ton of success against Alabama, I think that Alabama's will was completely demoralized. I think that Alabama was kind of shown what what happens if you don't go for the 50-50, if you don't get your 50-50 balls, if you don't play with, even if it's a 1%, not as much of effort, right? It really felt like Florida was fully locked in, fully knew what was at stake in this game, and was just a little bit more prepared than Alabama. I think Alabama was still even though they started out decently well, I think they were still kind of reeling from what happened in that Tennessee game. But I think what we saw on the Plains in Auburn shows that Alabama is capable of playing with some of the best teams in the country. I think that if Alabama can put that together and play like they're capable of, I think that Alabama can rebound their way, not get punished on the glass like they did against Florida, and Alabama can beat Florida. But no matter what happens, I think the winner of the Alabama-Florida side probably wins the tournament. Because I think that Alabama or Florida would be able to beat Auburn or A&M. And I don't know what it is about that game, but I think that the Alabama-Florida game will partially be for the last number 1 seed, if that is the game that takes place. I think the fourth number 1 seed will be decided in that game, and I think additionally, whoever wins that game probably also wins the SEC. Would it shock me if Auburn won the SEC, even with what I'm saying right now? No, right? Over the course of the season, they were the best team in the conference. That's the reason they finished 15-3. It's the reason they won the SEC, right? I'm not trying to take anything away from them. But I do think that Alabama and Florida, I think that, when I say this, people are going to be like, Alabama's lost 4 of their last 7. Yes. If you have not seen the schedule that Alabama played, it's tougher than any schedule anyone's played in the entire country. When you look at how Alabama was able to go on the road at Tennessee, there were, a handful of things that went wrong. It wasn't like Alabama just got punished in Tennessee. Honestly, they played as well in Knoxville as they played in multiple years. Another thing that you have to look at is Alabama was doing really well in that Florida game, and something just fell apart in the second half. Now, credit to Florida, right? They were able to win the game. They were able to have the success. So they deserve all the credit in the world. They won that game. They were able to kind of punish Alabama and win the game kind of going away. But Alabama was able to prove in that Auburn game of what they're capable of. And that's the team that we knew this team was capable of. You're getting better defense out of Alabama. You're getting better starts out of Alabama. The end of game situation in this Auburn game was so much better than you saw in the Tennessee game. Alabama in general has done a good job fixing its mistakes this season. And I think in the Florida game, there were a lot of things that were uncovered. There were mistakes in game 1 that I think that they could fix for game 2. And so that's something that I would say that I think Alabama does win the game. I am going to predict that Alabama wins the tournament. There's something about whatever that Auburn game showed me. I really think that Alabama is a team, because of how successful they can be down low, is a team that does well in March. They're a team that is going to be able to be really successful, especially if they can rebound the basketball, especially if they can be as successful in the paint as they have been. They can win in a lot of different ways, and so I do think that Alabama can win the tournament. Would it upset me if they even lost to Kentucky or lost in the first round? No. Because I think there's benefits and drawbacks to both. I think if you win the SEC, it gives you the confidence to prove, hey, we can beat 3 of the best teams in the country, which gives you the confidence moving forward to March Madness. If you lose, it gives you the rest, which I, again, don't think is a bad thing versus having to play 3 games. So either way, no matter what happens, whoever wins this tournament, I don't think that I will be upset one way or the other as long as Alabama does not come out and just lay an absolute egg. I obviously want us to be able to show that, even if we lose the game, if somebody's just hitting shots and can't miss, cool, it happens. But if we're just playing our brand of basketball and able to play and have the success we're able to have, I think that Alabama is able to win this tournament. But like I said, if I had to say someone else is going to win the tournament, not named Alabama, I'm probably going with Florida. I think they're one of the hotter teams in the country right now, and they've proven that they can beat some of the best teams. They beat Alabama, they beat Auburn, both in their home stadiums. So I think Florida would probably be my pick to win the conference. Like I said, I do think Arkansas probably wins 2 games. I think that Oklahoma potentially could also win 2 games. Those are 2 of my lower seeded teams that are going to have to play on Wednesday that I do think could win 1 or 2 games in the tournament. So those are the ones that I probably would look at as teams that definitely have a chance at winning just because of how they're built and how they're playing currently. So that's what I would have to say about the SEC tournament. Like I said, this is going to be a lot of fun. I will be in Nashville this week. Just a heads up, I am not going to record an episode until I get back. So just a heads up, since I'm going to record that on probably on Sunday evening, what it's going to be is it's going to be a breakdown of the SEC tournament. And then I will record another episode probably on Monday, which will talk about what our NCAA tournament first weekend looks like. So that would be like the Thursday, Saturday, or Friday, Sunday games. So there will be 2 episodes coming out in pretty quick succession. One will be an SEC tournament recap, talking about everything that happened from an Alabama perspective and from an SEC perspective. And then the second one will be talking about everything that happened in the NCAA tournament and what our potential road looks like as that bracket's going to come out on Sunday evening. So just a heads up, that is what the schedule kind of looks like. Thank you so much, everyone, for the support on this. As I mentioned, please throw down in the comments, what your opinion of the content is, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, as well as what you think the video feed looks like with the updated camera. Thank you so much, as always, for the support, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.